Welcome to the Styleframe Saturdays podcast. I'm your host, Caroline Lee. Join me as I take a deep dive into the wonderful world of style frames and interview those who are industry wizards when it comes to this stage of the animated production process. For those who may not know, style frames are pieces of creative that are developed during the pre-production phase of an animation project, and they help creators and clients alike get an idea of the overall style of a piece. Sometimes the initial vision is carried through to the end, and other times it ends up on the cutting room floor. During this podcast, we'll discuss projects of all shapes and sizes, and the challenges, rewards, and lessons learned while developing what I like to call each guest's favorite frame. As we've mentioned in previous episodes, this podcast would not be possible without the help from Riverside and Anchor. They're the Styleframe Saturdays podcasting tools of choice, and if you're interested in learning more about their capabilities, we've got a couple of links in today's show notes for you to check out. So now that you know how we're getting this podcast to you, let's dive into today's episode. Today's guest is actually, you know what? Maybe I should let him do the talking for this one.
What up, what up? Winbush here. And today I'm excited to be on Styleframe Saturdays.
Hey, Winbush, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. How have you been?
Been lovely. It's been a great summer, coming out of a heat wave, but still can't complain. Got some AC here and everything, so yeah, everything's good.
Yep. I know it's been a heat wave across this country. It's been wild. I am personally looking forward to the seasonal changes over here on the East Coast and transitioning into fall, but I guess it's still a little warm for you guys out there, right? During this time of year?
Yeah, I guess the heat wave hit us later than everybody else. So I know this past week it's been triple digits all week. So it's been as high as 115 in some places, but I'm on the coast, I'm the ocean's right there. So it got as high as 108, but yeah, it's been pretty wild. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is wild. Well, I'm hoping that it cools off for you guys sooner than later as well. Because I think we've all been hit with this heat wave across the country. Time for a change. If it's okay with you, I'd love to jump in to things. For anyone who doesn't know you, which, I don't know if that's actually the case, but I have to say it anyway. For anyone who doesn't know you, would you mind telling our audience a little bit about yourself, perhaps a little bit about your story and how you got into the field of motion design, animation, and video?
Yeah. So for those that don't know me, my name is Jonathan Winbush. I'm a motion graphics artist based here at the Southern California. I've worked with studios like Marvel, DC, Warner Brothers. I first got my start actually working under Happy Madison. Adam Sandler actually took me under his wing, and I got to work on a lot of their properties as well as a lot of movie properties and TV shows and stuff like that. So I've been doing this professionally since about 2006, where I've been, stationed here in Southern California the entire time. And I started doing YouTube pre-pandemic, maybe around 4 or 5 years. And I just basically started it as a way to give back to the community, because I remember when I was an intern and junior artist, a lot of the mentors that I looked up to, they helped me grow as an artist with open hands. There was never anybody that I could remember that said hey, we're going to keep these secrets to ourselves. Everybody out here was just so helpful and helping me grow as an artist. And so I felt since I've started my own studio here and I practically work alone for the most part, this was my way of at least trying to give back a little bit to other artists out there. And hopefully people are able to learn some new skill sets off of me.
For sure. No, I feel like you've taught so many people in this industry, especially with regards to Unreal, how to use Unreal and really, work that into their tool set. But, speaking of Unreal, speaking of, giving back to the community and everything, I'd love to chat about the frame that you're going to share with us today. Could you tell us a little bit about the piece that you've selected?
Yeah, so I picked a piece that wasn't actually built in Unreal, but this is a very special style frame because this was my start into real-time rendering, which happened more than a decade ago. I want to say this was 2011. And so this particular frame is when I was working at Warner Brothers. And while I was there, I was working on a lot of television stuff, Big Bang Theory, 2.5 Men, cool. A lot of CW properties like Arrow, The Flash, and things of that nature. But Warner Brothers is a really large studio, so it's really sectioned out. I came in, I was one of the first motion graphics artists there, and I was helping build up that department there. But Also, across the lot, there's a theatrical department where they only handle theatrical IPs like Harry Potter and Batman and stuff like that. You had WB Games right outside the studio, which, they handled all the Lego properties, Mortal Kombat, to name a few games that they handled. And then there was like a home video department. So everything was very sectionalized. And so, like, me being a motion graphics artist, like, I was happy working on the stuff that I got to work on. But I would always say, like, especially being a gamer, I'm like, hey, how come we're not working with the WB Games team? And what can we do to try to, do some of their campaign work or even work internally on the games and stuff like that? Because
Sure.
they will always hire outside studios, to do the work. And so after getting a lot of, we'll talk to them type things just to kind of like brush you off to the side, I took it upon myself to kind of look at the schedule of games that were being in current development. And I saw Lego Harry Potter 2 was in development. And I actually grabbed assets off of their server and I started putting style frames together just based off of the stuff that I saw there. Like, we had access to, at the time they built out like all the Lego characters in Maya. And so we had the Maya models, we had the style guides, like everything was there on the server. And so I started to put together my own set of style frames that I wanted to go pitch over to WB Games. And so, like, in my free time, I put together these frames. I showed my boss at the time that was head of the department, and he was just kind of blown away. He was like, you know what, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's go show this to the people over at WB Games. And yeah, without even a hesitation, the next day they were like, they loved your stuff. They want to talk to you further about how you might want to work with them, at least on the release campaign for the series and everything. And so that's kind of what kicked that off right there.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. So you were working at Warner Brothers then, and you were working for a specific department. You weren't, it sounded like, every department has their own sort of creative teams. If I'm,
Right.
correct me if I'm wrong. That's so cool. So you like literally spearheaded this. That's awesome.
I was known to do that a lot because they had to animate. Like, I'm a big kid, right? So like video games and cartoons are my jam. So I know, I don't want to get too far off the track, but like, Cartoon Network was working closely with WB.
Gotcha.
They were working on Teen Titans Go at the time. And, I did the same exact thing. I pulled together assets, pitched it over to the animation department, and yeah, same thing there. So I had that reputation of kind of going outside the box and just kind of pushing the boundaries, just because it could get monotonous when you're working on the same IPs a lot,
For sure.
So it's like I always wanted to try to bring new IPs into our team and just keep it exciting.
For sure. No, that's really cool. That's awesome that you did that. That's really cool. Well, then it sounds like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I was going to ask you, if you could walk us through how you approached like the creative brief with Warner Brothers Games, but it sounds like you kind of took this upon yourself. But maybe you could talk a little bit about, what those conversations were like with Warner Brothers Games, as you approached them with this idea.
Yeah, so the initial concept was they were going to release the game in 2 sets. And so they had the teaser, in which I sent the storyboards over there. I can't remember the villain's name at the time, but there was a teaser of just him looking in the mirror doing goofy stuff. And then that was just going to be the teaser. But, what I pitched on my boards was maybe we could have like some Legos collapse down on him. We could see from the viewport of Harry Potter, like the wand kind of going across the screen. And that's going to reveal the tagline, like Lego Harry Potter 2, years 5 through 7 coming soon. And so we worked on that initial concept. And at the time, that was all animated inside of Maya. And that took forever rendering. Like back then, we didn't have the GPU rendering or stuff that we have today. And so, that one went out to all the gaming sites, a lot of fanfare. It was a big deal. And then it was time to come to the launch trailer that was actually going to show like what the characters look like, gameplay, and things of that nature. And so we had all the assets to, like, I was working in cinema myself at that time. And so I had everything there that I needed to execute the next marketing campaign inside of cinema. But I'm like, we had an Xbox developer kit right there. I was often going into the game and playing it just to kind of get a feel for the land and the scenery and the concept and the stories and stuff. And I'm like, the stuff on the Xbox looks really good, and this stuff is happening in real time. For me to recreate this entire environment and to render it out, it could take, days, weeks, months, but I'm
Sure.
actually able to play it inside this Xbox system, and everything is happening in real time. And so that kind of got my gears turning as to how come when I'm working in my DCC, stuff is taking forever, but when I'm working on the PlayStation 3 or Xbox, everything is happening in real time and there's user input at the same time. So
Hmm.
like it's calculating the user input, it's calculating physics, the real time lighting dynamics and everything. And I'm like, this is crazy because at Xbox, like spec wise is way lower tier than what we had in our beefy computers. And so long story short, we were able to get access codes from WB Games to allow us to kind of I don't want to say like hack the Xbox, but it puts you in this system mode called God mode, which will allow you to practically break the game open and do anything that you want. And so I started experimenting inside of God mode. I actually brought my son down to the studio on the one weekend, and one of the producers, and I told my son like, hey, you're going to play this game before it comes out. All you have to do is, play the video game, and I'm going to handle the other stuff on this other controller. And so what I was actually controlling was a virtual camera. And so like the producer would tell my son like, hey, do this, this, and this. And while he's going through these different scenarios, I'm like on the side with another Xbox controller, actually maneuvering the camera as if I was like a VP. And yeah, it was kind of crazy because we were recording everything to tape deck back then. And at the end of the day, we showed everybody what we had came up with, and they're like, these renders look crazy. How'd you get them done so fast? And it's like,
Wow.
no, this was all, in gameplay. Like we did this all in real time. And so that's what kind of kicked off like that whole real time moment for me, because ever since then, working on other projects, I'm just like, man, I wish I could just do this, inside of Xbox and have all my creative juices like flowing instantly and be able to see in real time what I want to output.
Yeah, no. So you've been a real time sort of like pioneer for like quite a while now, So that's
Yeah,
really
trying
cool.
to.
That's really cool to hear
Always
that it's
chasing that
been
dragon, right?
exactly. That's so cool to hear though. So I mean, like from like 2006 until now, you've just been like pushing the real time stuff. And hey, look where everything's headed. I mean, you look in Maxon's, latest release, and that real time button's there. So people are ready for it.
Yeah.
It's go time for sure. You've spoken a little bit about the IPs around WB Games and everything. So just curious, as you were working on this, knowing that Harry Potter and actually Lego are pretty well known brands, were there any elements that you could or couldn't play with when building these spots?
For the most part, everything seemed to be fair game because this is stuff that typically, like, we were thinking outside the box, and so they were really receptive just to kind of see what we would put together.
Sure.
And everybody, from the marketing team to the heads of the studio to the development team, like everybody was loving this direction, and it kind of became a workflow for working with some of the other games in the future. Like after Lego Harry Potter, they brought me on to work on Lego Batman 2, in which
Okay.
we did the same exact process there. I worked on Batman Arkham Asylum for the Nintendo Wii, Mortal Kombat 9. And so it just became, like the status quo from that part out, because we realized how quickly we were able to iterate, and we were able to put out spots like, instantly for the games and stuff like that. So
Very
yeah,
cool.
it was an interesting time. Very fun too.
I'm sure. No, definitely. It sounds like it. So then to go off of that a little bit, could you sort of walk through what the sort of technical workflow was then like? Because you weren't using Unreal exactly for this one, correct?
Right.
Okay. So
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
the
So
gaming system that you were using in tandem with Cinema or Maya, you were mentioning,
mhm.
could you walk through what the technical workflow is actually like to kind of put this together? I know you touched upon it briefly, but would just love
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
hear like a breakdown of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so from start to end, the very first thing would be getting into the developer kit of the game console and putting it in a God mode. And what that did for us is it would allow us to basically go to any game level that we wanted. make our characters invincible, make them as powerful as we needed them to be, basically giving you free reign over the entire game. That's why they called it God mode.
Mhm.
And what that allowed us to do is use a second set of video game controllers to control the camera so that we were able to set up our shots. And that's how we did the storyboarding too. Like we would actually have one of the location scouts come down and he would virtually set up the shots and the compositing and or the composition of how he wanted the different shots. And, you know, we lay out the storyboards and come up with the flow of how we wanted like each scene to be played out and stuff like that, which was, you know, this was all new to me too. So it's like we were
Right.
able to bring other people from other departments in, and it just became like this big collaborative effort. And so, you know, we can't render technically out of a game console. And so what our solution from there was we actually had the HDMI go right into a tape deck. And so we actually recorded everything to it wasn't a real, I want to say it was like a Tascam or something. I forget what kind of
Okay.
tape, but it was like an actual physical magnetic tape that a tape cassette that we recorded to. And then from there, you know, the editors could pull that in and they can edit and lay out everything inside of I want to say it was Final Cut back then before it became
Right.
Final Cut X. That's what all the editors were using and everything. And
Mhm.
if we were able to get like our string out of all the shots that we needed. And that way the producer could kind of cut everything down and kind of streamline it. And then if there was any type of assets that we might need to add on top of that, I was able to bring it into Cinema and add, you know, like more CG because we could do the tracking in Cinema. We used a lot of After Effects for, you know, compositing and stuff of that nature on top of that stuff. So yeah, it was just a lot of R&D and figuring it out as you would go.
For sure. No, it sounds like it. It's so cool though that you were able to sort of like figure this out on the fly for this job. And I mean, I'm assuming there was sort of a deadline for this, you know, because it was going to be these promotional pieces for the game and everything. So
Yeah.
knowing that you were sort of figuring this out as you went along, how did it feel sort of incorporating this into your workflow? Did it feel like it was speeding things up, or was it about the same? Or because you were learning things, did it feel like it was slowing things down? Like, how did it feel kind of going through all of that with this new tool set?
Yeah, I mean, for me, there was no pressure at all because I was having fun
Right.
doing stuff, like learning new stuff and coming up with ideas on the fly. And it actually allowed us to iterate faster.
Oh,
So
cool.
I think originally we were only supposed to do 3 spots, and then we ended up doing like 10 spots because we were able to
Wow.
work so fast and efficiently. And yeah, we did everything from the initial teaser to the launch trailer. We did several TV spots. When the game came to mobile, because it came to like iPad and iPhone and Android and stuff like that, we were
Mhm.
able to use the same thing for making a commercial for that because they weren't even going to release a commercial for mobile. But, you know, we were able to work so quickly that we put something together for that. Yeah, there was a whole plethora of different opportunities there that just allowed us to work so fastly and quickly that they just kept throwing more and more stuff at us because we were able to do it and we were always ahead of schedule.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. So to backtrack then a little bit and to play off of that. So I know you had said, you know, you weren't technically using Unreal for this frame and for these promotional pieces, but having had this
Right.
experience, you know, working through this project and developing not only the style frame, but these 10, sounds like 10 pieces now at this point. Um,
Yeah.
Now that you know Unreal, now that you've mastered it and you're teaching it and stuff like that, how has Unreal helped you sort of speed up your workflow all the way starting all the way at like the creative development process? Are you starting to think about Unreal at that point? You know, walk us through a
Yeah.
little bit of how
Yeah.
you approach your projects now that you have a real-time sort of utility like Unreal.
Right. So it's been an interesting couple of years, right? Because it first started 2019 is when it really started working into my workflow because that's when Epic officially announced that you could start bringing Cinema 4D projects natively into Unreal. And this was Unreal Engine 4, so this is
Right.
2019. And so that's kind of where it all kicked off for me, especially on YouTube because there was no documentation or anything like that. Wasn't even official Maxon. That was Epic that took it upon themselves
Right.
to integrate cinema. And so the Maxon team had no idea how to really utilize it. Epic kind of just put it together. And so there was a document on it, but it wasn't fully fleshed out. And there was absolutely like no video trainers out there on how to implement the two programs together.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I took it upon myself to kind of figure things out. And as I was figuring it out, I was recording it. And once I had that like eureka moment, that's when I was like, okay, now I'm comfortable to put together a quick, I want to say it's like 15-20 minute tutorial. And this was like midnight because I just came back from SIGGRAPH. And so I put it up on YouTube that night. And then the next day I went to SIGGRAPH, and I guess like everybody saw it like on the Maxon team and the Epic team already because it started circulating around the blogs and stuff. And so that's how I guess was starting to be known as like the motion graphics Unreal person, just based off of that like tutorial alone. And so as I was working in it, more and more people that especially that had interest in real-time rendering started asking me questions, and I kind of just kept flowing with it. And that's where like it all seems like it's almost like an accident that people start knowing me as like an Unreal mentor, because for a long time I was the only person out there kind of utilizing motion graphics with Unreal.
Mm-hmm.
So the more everybody out there asked me questions, the more I would dive into it and figure stuff out and reciprocate that back, and to the point to where I got really comfortable enough with it that I started using it in client work myself. And so like I do it from the beginning stages all the way to the final execution. So I'll storyboard everything out in Unreal, which
Very
is
cool.
really cool because I could build out an entire environment and then just set up my cameras and everything where I need to be, depending on what the project is too. But I'm able to quickly iterate and set up cameras and instantly, export out a frame that I need, put together my storyboards and everything, and send that off to the client. And the cool thing I like about it too is what you see is what you get. And so
Right.
the client doesn't see like one set of boards and then the final design might look like something else. It's like, no, I'm putting everything together. So what you see in my style frames is what you're going to get on the final delivery, which a lot of clients have really been liking a lot.
I was just going to ask, when you're talking to clients about, what the process is, if they're unfamiliar with it, how receptive are
Yep.
they to knowing that, what they're going to see initially is more or less what it's going to look like in the end? I'm sure that's got to be, they're smiling ear to ear when you tell them something like that.
Yeah, it's been because I get excited about stuff. So sometimes I let stuff slip. So it's been a gift and a curse because once I tell clients, like, because they'll say, like, hey, how did you turn this around so fast? I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm using Unreal Engine. And then they Google it and look into what Unreal is. And then it kind of hits me in the butt because clients are like, whenever they have a change on something, they're like, well, you're using Unreal, right? Like you could just, knock that change out and get it right over to us. As to before, you would make the change, you would have to render it. And sometimes depending on what the change was, that could be a few hour process. Right. But now it's, it's strictly, or it's greatly condensed. And so a lot of clients that know I use Unreal, it's kind of come back to bite me in the butt because they're just like, oh, we can make this change. No problem. Jonathan's using Unreal. Right. And yeah, so.
Well, this might be it's
become one of those things.
This might be a silly question then. So forgive me for asking it if it is. But, the clients that you're working with, are they largely gaming clients, or are they, still some broadcast clients that, you've made, had relationships with from back in the day?
Yeah, that's been a great part. A big client of mine is Five Stone Entertainment, in which I've worked with them through a lot of like History Channel shows, Discovery Channel, cool. National Geographic. And so I've been their main two guy for like the past decade. And, I put together all the show packages for them. And so they've been with me basically every step of the way. And so like they remember whenever I first was working with them, I was using Cinema 4D standard and physical render. And then I moved on to Octane. And then, they were surprised like, oh, wow, this looks great. And you're rendering faster. And then I moved over to Redshift and they saw a change in that. And then, I started using Unreal, and they're just like each step in my career as I'm like using these different platforms, it feels like I'm just kind of outdoing myself. And they noticed that because they're just like, every time I would make a change, they're like, oh yeah, you're using something else, aren't you? And it's like, yeah, it's like just always trying to work faster and better. So yeah, I mean, with the Unreal stuff, like I'm trying to think the last show that I could say I worked on. Oh yeah, for History Channel, beginning of the year, there's a show called Aztec Gold that I worked on. And Yeah, I did the entire show myself, all through Unreal Engine, and everything from the CG environments to the maps, lower thirds, and all that done in Unreal. And it was they loved it just because I was able to create their vision, like not photoreal, but
Right.
real stylized. Like I forget the term, it was like photoreal stylized or something like that,
Hmm.
because they were always like, if we want something photoreal, we'll just shoot it ourselves. And so they
True.
liked having that creative liberty to make something look like the physical environment, but stylize it enough to make it different enough from the show.
No, definitely. No, and I wanted to ask that because, I'm sure clients who are in the gaming space understand, the technicalities of like something like Unreal and these real-time
Yeah.
engines and everything. So, I was just curious when you start to approach then some of these more broadcast or even sort of marketing, advertising type clients, if they're sort of aware of, the capabilities of something like Unreal Engine and, how quickly it can sort of allow you to iterate on different creative concepts and ideas. So that's actually really cool then
Right.
to hear that, you've been working with somebody for the longest time now who's kind of been following you the whole step of the way, saying like, oh, this looks really cool. Oh, this looks really cool. Oh no, wait, now this looks really cool. So that's
Right.
awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to, see how, other industries learn about Unreal Engine. I've dabbled in it very minimally myself. It is something that I definitely want to try to learn a bit more about if I can. And,
Yeah.
you're the person that I, learned about it from, your
Oh, thank
tutorials, seeing you online and, your relationship with Maxon and other sort of outlets like School of Motion promoting it. So,
Right.
within the MoGraph space, I feel like, when you mention the name Winbush or Unreal, they kind of go hand in hand. But outside of that, I do kind of wonder, do some of these other marketing agencies and advertising companies and just brands and companies in general, do they know that Unreal is out there and how quickly it can sort of help them get these
They
creative ideas out?
It's been getting I've been getting more and more inquiries about it. I've done some private talks at with dinners with Epic, with studios like ESPN, Fox
Yeah.
News, a lot of broadcasting networks, especially that work in real time. Because they use like VizRT systems to
Right.
do all the real time stuff. And Unreal is free compared to using a VizRT, which is very expensive. And so they're talking about making the transition. But then I've also been hit up by studios like Royale, Zoic. I know Barton at ABC has been looking for more Unreal artists. And so
Cool.
it's slowly starting to work into the workflow. Like it's the thing where, especially when people, ask me about it, like, hey, should we switch everything to Unreal? And my answer is always no,
Mhm.
because this is a tool that should be utilized when you think would make it convenient for your artist. I never really believe in like killing everything off and just like redoing your workflow. Like if
Sure.
something's working for your studio and you can add it to your pipeline at some point, then that's cool. But I don't think it's a replacement for, offline renders that are out there, because I always take it as it's a case by case instance. And so I try to tell artists it's probably vital to know as much as you can,
Right.
because I know just me coming up, like when I was coming up, I first learned soft image XSI, which that
Oh,
program
wow.
no longer even exists.
Yeah.
And so it's like, in, Autodesk combustion and like all these programs I learned back in the day don't even exist. But the concept and basics of like 3D and compositing and stuff, that does exist. And
Right.
so like what I've always prided myself on, being able to adapt and be very versatile in no matter what applications are out there, because like Unreal might be big today, but who's to say they don't collapse tomorrow?
Right.
And then you don't want to be stuck like, oh man, I spent all this time only knowing this one thing. It's like you really want to be adaptable, and that's how you're going to have longevity in this game.
No, for sure. And it's really cool you say that. And it's making me think too, all these studios, even individual artists, they have their own sort of processes and workflows that they follow. So, I'm actually
Right.
kind of curious to hear from you, what your process was like prior to Unreal and how much it's changed since you've started to incorporate Unreal. You've obviously touched upon that, it's allowed you to get
Excuse me.
iterations on things. out there more quickly. But, how much has it
Right.
affected your pipeline thus far?
Yeah, it's gotten to the point now that I'm so comfortable in Unreal that I could put together complete projects strictly on Unreal. Like, as an artist, we become comfortable with the different programs that we know. And so when I was first doing this stuff, I was forcing myself to use Cinema 4D with Unreal and using After Effects with Unreal, like, because these are the programs that I know like the back of my hand, right? But the more I became comfortable with Unreal, the more I could pretty much like bang everything out strictly in that program if I absolutely needed to. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes there's some stuff in Cinema you might need, like the MoGraph module, or I still love animating my cameras and stuff like that in Cinema. And so there's still aspects of Cinema that I use, but I feel like I'm to the point to where I can practically do everything on the fly instead of Unreal.
That's so cool.
And so the only thing that I probably had cut out, well, I don't want to say cut out because I still use it from time to time, but like I was a big Redshift person. I went from Octane over to Redshift. And if I'm doing like movie trailer work, especially where it's just like big text and stuff like that coming through, there's no reason for me to take that out of Cinema into Unreal. Like I'll still just use Redshift for that type of stuff. But if I'm building like a CG environment, like I work on like shows like The Deadliest Catch and Alaska Last Frontier, where I would have to build out like big mountainous scenes up there in Alaska. And it doesn't make sense for me to do that in Cinema 4D anymore, especially with like the foliage assets and everything in Unreal. So those are the type of instances where it's like, okay, I'll build these big luscious environments inside of Unreal and everything just runs at 60 frames per second, no problem.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, it's so cool. Just hearing you talk about it, I know now I feel like I need to like try to jump back into it like in the next few weeks just so I can, so I can use all these cool things. But
I mean, I am working on a new course that should be out within a month. And so
I remember you mentioning
like my
that.
old course was on MoGraph.com. That was with Unreal 4, but I recently got support from Epic Games, and they sent me the Epic Mega Grant in order to continue with the educational line and stuff.
Amazing.
And so a part of that was I had to make a course for Unreal Engine 5, but the caveat is it's going to be absolutely free this time. Like there's not going to be any charge or anything for that. So
wow.
That's something I've been working on all summer. That's why I haven't taken any client work, and so hopefully it's coming out soon. I should be wrapping on it.
That's really huge. Yeah, no. Well, that's, we're going to have to keep an eye out for that because, again, all this Unreal talk, it just sounds like, everyone's itching to get their hands on it and learn it and have at least a basic understanding of it. Because like you said earlier, don't get rid of your workflow. What works for you works. But if you can incorporate a couple of tools that, speed it up, why not? Absolutely. Well, going back to the, WB Games project, the Harry Potter Lego pieces, it sounds like you really weren't given any constraints while working on this project. But I do want to ask, were there any constraints while you're working on this?
Just don't mess up because they were taking a big chance on it. Because again, everybody's comfortable in the, the typical status quo workflow. True. And so when you're taking a chance on, especially because they were taking a chance on me to begin with, I'd never worked with the WB Games department in this regards. And so it's, the type of thing where we loved what you pitched with us. We loved your initiative to even approach us in the first place. Usually we hire, outside agencies to work on this type of stuff, and we're going to keep it internal. So, please make sure you know what you're doing, and because that's a big franchise, right? I mean, that's Harry Potter at the time was huge. So
and Lego too. That's another big IP as well. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, the Lego games are huge. So,
so I guess the better question would have been to know. You ask, not that were there any constraints, but was there pressure to do this project?
I just want to say, I was probably naive. Like when I'm thinking about it now, I'm like, man, if I would have screwed that up, that would have been over with. But at the time, it's like I had so much confidence in myself and being able to problem solve and stuff. I was just having a blast while doing it. And so there was never a time where I doubted myself as an artist of not being able to execute on the final plan. It was just all about how do we get to where we need to be in the end. And yeah, that's why I became a motion graphics artist. Like I love just the R&D and the experimentation and
Absolutely.
just the problem solving behind it almost more than the animation part. Like figuring stuff out, you kind of get like that adrenaline rush of, I wasn't able to find how to do this online. That my other colleagues know how to do it. I figured it out. This is crazy. And yeah, there's no better feeling than that, right?
Absolutely. No, when you're done with the project, you're sort of like, okay, I can take a breath. But you've learned a whole lot as
Yeah,
you've worked on it, and you're sort of like, that was really fun. You're sort of like, okay, when can I jump into the
right.
next one? I think that's why I don't want to speak for everybody in the industry, but a lot of people, will work on personal pieces as soon as like
Yeah,
maybe when a client gig wraps up or when they have some downtime. And you talk about balancing those things a little bit, but when you have such passion for what you do, that balance meter, I think, it tends to be a little bit different. So, yeah,
right.
it's cool to hear that, you were sort of like, I was so stoked to work on this, and, and we made it happen. And then on top of it, WB was sort of like, oh yeah, this is great. Like, job well done.
Right.
And we got this many more pieces out of it too. So a happy
Right.
client is always good.
Exactly. And I mean, like, just out throughout my career, the biggest piece of advice I can say to any artist is don't cripple yourself with the fear of messing up, because I know a lot of people, especially in the art industry, there's a lot of like artist burnout.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's because they don't take the time to kind of think outside the box. Whenever stuff gets monotonous and you're only trying to figure it out in this particular order because that's what you're used to, that's where the burnout happens. But if you take the time to sometime just think outside the box, experiment, try new things, and just get creative with it, that's how I feel like you kind of prevent like the artist burnout. And plus, you feel good about yourself because you're coming up with new techniques that you can then use on other projects as well.
That's so true. No, I couldn't agree with you more there. Absolutely. Well, to go off of that too, then, what would you say then was the biggest challenge about this project that you worked on?
For the Harry Potter one or
Yes.
for the Unreal
No,
stuff
sorry
recently?
for the Harry Potter one.
Um, that one, maybe just trying to teach other artists, at the time, because everybody was stuck in their I guess their workflow, and no one really was understanding what I was trying to do at the end of the day. And so for me, it's just like I'm a free flowing, free form artist, but trying to, like, we had a team, we had a department. So trying to get them to understand the vision of how we needed to execute it, I would say just those creative barriers was more of the nuance than anything else. But yeah, I mean, that just comes from education and helping your fellow peers out and try to
Right.
get them over that threshold to where they're comfortable trying out new stuff as
No,
well.
absolutely. And, what then would you say was the biggest reward about working on this project too?
Getting to work on Lego Harry Potter or Lego Batman too, because
Oh,
that
that's right.
one,
Yeah.
yeah, did the same thing. They that was another huge project because the Lego games before that, none of the characters ever talked before. There's no VO artists or anything.
Mhm.
They just made like grunt noises and stuff like that. But for Lego Batman 2, this was the first time there was actually a voiceover cast inside one of these Lego games. And so it was a big deal at the time, and they entrusted me to work on that campaign and in some of the in-game graphics as well. And so that was a big one. Plus, I got to bring my son back down to help me down on that one. I think he was maybe 10 at the time. And so it was just one of those, great moments where you get to be the cool dad. He's down there at the studio, he's bragging to his friends. And then
Oh,
on top of that, we won like a BAFTA award for that campaign and a Telly Award. And, we both have the same name, Jonathan Winbush. And so when the awards came, he actually took them because he's like, this is mine. I worked on this. And so like I had pictures of him holding the awards up and stuff like that. So that
oh
was
my
that
God.
was a cool moment in my life. So
I'm sure. Oh my God,
yeah.
that's too funny. Oh, he sounds really sweet.
Yeah.
Well, I know you
Yeah.
had said, of the frames that you were able to select from, like this was the favorite that you wanted to talk about today. But what about this frame makes it your favorite frame?
Yeah, just the lineage behind it and how it kind of spearheaded to me to where I am today. Like back then, I wasn't even thinking about game engines. It was more about the fact that you're able to render stuff in real time. And that's just something that even after I left Warner Brothers and I was back to, using GPU rendering, that's something that
Mhm.
stuck into my back of my head. Like I'm here, like I'm stacking my computer with like 4 GPUs. I had like a mini render farm here, and I was still never able to get to that satisfactory point to where I'm able to render stuff instantly. Like I'm still doing overnight renders and stuff like that. So that is what kind of made me go off the cuff a little bit and start experimenting with game engines. Like I started off with Unity for about a year, trying to figure out how to utilize Unity. There was a game engine that Amazon had called Lumberjack. Like I got a hold of Lumberjack and was trying to figure that out. And it kind of just put me into that mindset, like something has to give. Like I have to be able to figure out how I could get back to real-time technologies. And so, yeah, that frame is kind of what just kicked it off, and always had that thought in my mind, like there, there got to be something I could figure out for the industry. Like it doesn't have to be like this,
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I love this story. I think it's so cool, to kind of hear how everything started and where it's at and where it's going. I mean, we're all going to be, looking to you to, get the real time stuff under our belts, because it just feels like it is like the wave of the future. But,
Yeah.
this has just been wonderful, Winbush. Thank you so much for sharing this frame and this project with us today. If people
Thank you.
want to connect with you and learn more about what you're working on, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, I would say my YouTube channel first and foremost. That's where I seem to have the biggest community. So that's youtube.com/Jonathan Winbush. Other social media platforms like same thing, Jonathan Winbush on Instagram and Twitter. And yeah, usually like YouTube is probably the biggest one where I like if someone leaves a comment, I absolutely make it a point to answer somebody at some point that day. So if anybody has any questions, usually YouTube is the best place to get in touch with me there.
Awesome. Good to know. Well, we'll share links to some of the tools and resources we mentioned here for our audience to check out. We'll also share these links as well so that if anyone has any Unreal questions or just simply wants to talk shop or just connect with you, we'll make sure to drop those down for our audience as well. But that wraps it up for today, everyone. Feel free to email us at styleframesatpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think of the show. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, if you like what you see and hear here, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and review the show on your favorite podcasting platforms as well. And lastly, come connect with us on social. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you again, Winbush, for joining us today.
Thank
and
you.
we'll see you in the next one.
All right. Take care.